All right, so let's go ahead. You did a masterful job. I saw it on X, and I want to talk about what you've done with regard to the kind of the basic concept that you have, which is unique. Nobody I've ever seen has talked about this concept. Maybe Elon has it in his head. I doubt it. I think it's unique to you. So let's see what you got.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I think this is an interesting way to think about SpaceX. And it may just sort of gel maybe some people's thoughts about this. And by the way, this image of Starship landing in the Indian Ocean is astonishing.
Astonishing, yes.
Right. And of course,
I'm still waiting to see it get caught.
yeah, that may be 2 or 3 or 4 launches from now. I think that's a
Yes.
possibility sometime next year. And of course, we talked about on our previous show with Optimus in a rowboat taking these photos. So we appreciate that.
It turned out, unless they were lying, it was actually a little kiddie
Yeah,
pool, a kiddie pool with cameras in it. Maybe that was true. I'm not sure.
pretty much. Yeah. So the title of this piece is From Oceans to Orbits, 2 Ages of Discovery. And as I thought about this, I saw some parallels between what happened in terms of Europeans coming to North America
Uh-huh.
and what allowed North America to really grow and flourish, right? And then we were at an age when the development of North America really was reliant on improvements in shipping capabilities.
Right.
Right. And so I'm seeing a parallel then with that in terms of the new ships, which are rockets, and the capabilities that are being developed now there. So let me just walk you through this real quick. So
Sure.
the ships that came across initially, wind-powered ships, and the ships, the Santa Maria and the Nina and the Pinta, they were technological marvels of their day. Right. The innovations in those ships were phenomenal in terms of what they were able to do versus previous ships. And that allowed sort of the quote unquote discovery, of North America.
Hmm.
Right. But then the challenge is then moving cargo. Right. And the example here is for heavy, low value goods like pig iron, ocean freight rate alone could account for as much as 1/5 of the final market price in 1870.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And this, of course, is like, you know, hundreds of years after, Columbus came. So this was an issue for a long, long time. But what happened then was the invention of the steamship. And this is the first one, the SS Savannah. And it was a sailing ship with steam. It was like one of the first hybrid vehicles, right?
Cool.
And the steam power gave it reliable propulsion, where sometimes when the wind doesn't blow, that slows an ocean voyage down dramatically.
Hmm.
Okay. And then, of course, we got larger ships, more efficient ships, and all kinds of innovation. Um, so this is just a table I put together. I believe this information to be accurate. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's an expert on shipping that will probably shoot all kinds of holes in this. So please forgive me if I don't have everything perfect here. With the limited time I had to put this together, I think it's reasonable. But again, I hold out the expectation that there's probably some mistake in here somewhere. But as an example, in 1492, the Santa Maria wind-powered ship, as far as I know, payload capacity of about 100 tons.
Okay.
Took about 70 days to cross the Atlantic. So the cost per kilogram is about $15.
Hmm.
Okay. Mayflower, 1620, wind-powered, higher payload capacity, a little faster, and you get the cost per kilogram down to about $3
Hmm.
or under 3. So that was a big improvement for sure.
Right.
And then you get the first steamship and you get the cost per kilogram down to $1
Hmm.
in a 29-day passage. So faster, cheaper,
Right.
right? And then you get bigger ships. And then you have the Titanic, which maybe isn't a great example, but it shows capability, right? 6,000 tons. Crossing time is 6 days, super fast ship.
Hmm.
You have to watch out for the icebergs. but you get the cost down to like 15 cents. And even today with the big container, the diesel container ships we have
Hmm.
that have a massive capacity, the cost per kilogram isn't really a whole lot better than what the Titanic had. Now, of course, the volume is huge,
Right.
right? And you could ship a lot more, but the cost per kilogram, we haven't really made much improvement in that really in 100 years, if these numbers are accurate.
Right. Right.
But you can imagine what this does in terms of transatlantic trade. The ability to ship goods here, the ability to ship goods back to Europe, greatly enhanced by the fact that they can do it in a cost-effective method.
Exactly.
Okay. So that was, and here I'm just sharing the screenshots from the post for those that want to read it. I won't go through this word for word, but the ships got faster. They became exponentially cheaper on a per ton basis. So it turns the Atlantic from a barrier into a commercial highway. And I don't know how many ships there are on the world's oceans at any given time, but it's got to be thousands.
It's a lot.
Yeah, right. These big container ships.
Yes.
So what we have now is Starship and what I'm calling the commercial space highway. That will allow for basically a commercial space highway where none existed. Right. And it's of course we know now what happened in terms of the development of North America. The same kind of thing I think would be possible in space, finally, because we have a vessel that will allow us to do that.
Right.
Right. So space flight's been horrendously expensive. So in 1957, Sputnik, which wasn't designed to be much of anything other than just to get something up in space, had a payload capacity of about 100 kilograms, cost about $8.5 million per kilogram, right? Now, of course, it wasn't designed to be a cargo ship. It was just kind of proof of concept. Saturn V, about $182,000 per kilogram.
Oh,
Space Shuttle got down to about 54,000. Delta Heavy, 12,000. Falcon 9, 3.3. Falcon Heavy, 1,500, $1,600 a kilogram.
mm,
Starship, the goal is to get it under 200
right. Even as low as I believe 20,
eventually.
eventually 20.
Yeah.
If you catch both halves, it should be able to
Yeah.
be down somewhere close to 20.
And here's another visualization of that. This is a nice chart from Visual Capitalist, and it shows the per kilogram on a log scale, and kind of we were stuck here, space shuttles up here, right? Different things. And then with Falcon 1, Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and the Starship, you drive down this cost to get a kilogram into space, and you suddenly allow something to flourish where it couldn't before. It's now economical,
Right.
right? So it is inevitable that we're going to capitalize space. And SpaceX is one of the leading companies positioned to do that.
And I don't want to lose this in case case people haven't caught the analogy. And maybe you were going to do it on the next slide. Probably you were going to do it on the next slide. But you're kind of looking at space as being North America, as being the continent that is capable of being exploited in the same way that North America was able to be exploited, but the reaches and the potential for space being multiple times what North America was.
Yeah. I think it's easier for people to think about, oh, we've discovered a new continent.
Yeah.
It's easy to understand what that means,
Yeah.
right? Look at North America, what we did with North America. I say we as though I was there.
Right.
I am there now, but I wasn't involved in those early days. Um, with space, it's obviously different, but it's also vastly bigger.
Yes.
It's the ultimate continent to discover,
Yes.
right? Really unlimited potential now if we can get off this planet in a cheap way. We can, well, we'll get into some examples of what it might allow us to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this massive reduction in cost per ton or cost per kilogram is a critical enabler for a true space economy, right? It unlocks the possibility of building the infrastructure for a permanent human presence beyond Earth, whether that's on the moon, whether that's mining asteroids, whether that's Martian colonies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's just the start.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's historical parallels there between ships and rockets. So let's think about this in terms of, you know, at the end of the day, this is all about earning a profit,
Right.
right? In order for this to work, it has to be profitable. Now, what's interesting is the playbook that we're following here for space exploration and space commercialization is the same playbook that was used for the ships. And let me just explain why or
Sure.
how.
Hmm.
So initially, the the crown, the state, were the only entities that could fund putting ships around the world or spacecraft into space.
Hmm.
So, for example, with Columbus, the Spanish crown funded Columbus's high-risk voyage for geopolitical gain.
Right.
Okay. NASA's Apollo program was a Cold War necessity, right? A national project with a cost that would be unthinkable for any private company at the time.
Right.
So that's the first stage you go through is the state, the crown funding it. And then you might get into public-private partnerships where you start to bring in some commercial money. Okay. And we see that today with NASA funding, say anchor customer for SpaceX,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Now, SpaceX, I think next year is going to eclipse that in terms of, well, actually, they're going to eclipse, I think, NASA's budget next year.
Right.
They'll become a larger company than the company that's funding them or the entity that's funding them. But ultimately, you get to a fully commercial enterprise. And this is where now you can start to capitalize something,
Hmm.
right? So when the routes are proven and the technology is reliable, a purely commercial market explodes. And so the example here with the ships was the joint stock companies like the Dutch East India Company, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. It became one of the most valuable corporations in history by commercializing global trade. And I think we're entering this kind of stage in space now. We're starting to enter that.
Right.
Okay, so to Brian's point about SpaceX potentially being the most valuable company on the planet, potentially.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so again, we've talked about how getting the cost down is the key thing. It's the most important catalyst for commercializing space. Okay, it unlocks the business case for industries that were previously science fiction. Okay, we can actually now talk about space in a serious way.
Right. Yeah. It's when you have, what is it now, 300 launches of Falcon without an incident. And I forget how many of those returned the booster.
Many,
Many.
yeah,
More
hundreds.
than yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah, it's getting pretty reliable, pretty boring. Yeah, although for anybody who hasn't seen a Falcon rocket launch, it's pretty exciting. Um, so let's think about then, new frontiers, new fortunes. So we already have a global satellite internet,
Right.
Starlink, and we're seeing what's possible there and what the value of that is. And it may be likely at some point that we have Starlink embedded in every single Tesla vehicle, et cetera. Like the potential for Starlink is huge.
Right.
We also have the potential for hypersonic Earth travel, point to point anywhere on the planet for 30 or 45 minutes
Right.
instead of 15-hour or more flight. And then beyond that, we get to the point where we can have space-based manufacturing.
Hmm.
So whether it's perfect crystals, fiber optics, pharmaceuticals, and zero gravity, there's all kinds of advantages, as I understand it, to produce certain things in zero gravity. And then off-world resources, asteroid mining, energy generation, AI data centers. Um, Active debris removal. This is actually kind of an interesting one. Space cleanup.
Hmm.
We need to capture and deorbit the thousands of pieces of dangerous space junk that threaten current and future satellites. That may be a business for someone. Whether SpaceX does that remains to be seen. Maybe they can use the lasers on their Starlink satellites to blast this stuff out of the way. Yeah. Orbital construction. We want to build ultimately some pretty massive structures in space that are too big to fit in a single rocket, right? That could include next generation space telescopes, large space stations, assembly of interplanetary ships, for example,
Hmm.
even bigger ones than Starship. And then another interesting one is secure off-world archiving. The extreme cold and the vacuum and the security of space makes it a perfect place for the ultra long-term data storage or the preservation of biological materials.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a seed vault, for example, I think in
Yeah.
Sweden or Norway or somewhere,
Someplace, yeah.
right? And it's kept at cold conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we also want a seed vault in space
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or DNA bank for every species on Earth. So some of these things, become possible all of a
Right.
sudden.
Right.
Okay. So again, this kind of reminds me of this Dutch East India Company, and this is a really interesting story. And it also touches on the question of how can Tesla or SpaceX become so massively large? In the case of Tesla, we're talking about potential for a $100 trillion company
Right.
at some point. How's that even possible? Well, we actually have a good example of how it's possible here in the Dutch East India Company. So this was a company, the initials VOC. I won't even try to pronounce that. It's Dutch. But we call it a Dutch East India Company, but we'll call it VOC.
Right.
So they're actually a dominant force in global trade for nearly 200 years. It was founded in 1602, and it was considered to be the first multinational corporation and the first company to issue stock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they had many innovations in that regard.
Right.
All right. So here's an example. Somebody did a calculation that the Dutch East India Company in 1637 had a market cap that in today's dollars, and this is back in 2017, of 7.9 trillion.
Hmm.
And at the time they ran this calculation, it would take 20 modern companies to get to the same market cap.
Right.
Now, things have changed a little bit. It only takes 3 of these modern companies to get there. But
Right.
back then, in 2017, when these companies were much smaller, it took 20 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we adjust for inflation, today VOC, its peak would be about 10 trillion. And it's more than the combined market cap of Apple, Microsoft, and Google today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now they weren't the only ones. There was also the Mississippi Company and South Sea Company, the South Sea Bubble. They were also, very large enterprises as well. Okay. But we don't even, we don't have a company today that's worth 10 trillion.
Right.
But effectively we did back then. So this was an interesting company because it was essentially a company that had the powers of a nation. They had a unique charter that was granted by the Dutch government, and it wasn't just a business license. It was a grant of quasi-governmental power. And they had a monopoly on trade in Asia. And they were also given the authority to wage war. Right? Imagine.
Yeah.
Negotiate treaties with foreign rulers, establish colonies, mint its own currency. That's a fun one. And imprison and execute convicts. So this company had a lot of power.
A lot of power.
Right? No wonder it was a huge market cap.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, they had, as I mentioned, the first joint stock company on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. So that was a financial innovation, right? And allowed them to fund massive ventures like building fleets of ships. And that's kind of what SpaceX needs to do. Okay, and it spreads the risk among thousands of investors. They had a monopoly on spices. So the primary goal of the company was to dominate the incredibly lucrative spice trade.
Mm-hmm.
And they used their military power to seize control of the Spice Islands in modern-day Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, brutally enforcing a monopoly on valuable spices like nutmeg, mace, cloves, etc. And then they were also a major trade player within Asia. They weren't just bringing things back to Europe. They were buying and selling things in Asia.
Right.
So here's just a chart of the routes, right? So from the Dutch East Indies, Batavia, which is now Jakarta, sourcing material from the Spice Islands here, and then shipping it all over the world. They essentially also created a city in Cape Town where they needed to sort of resupply ships. And basically that's why, South Africa exists today.
And they didn't like deadheading any more than trucks like deadheading today. So they were trading and picking up other things and
Yeah,
taking that to the next port or to all the way back. So
that's right. Okay. So the scale of what they did was really unprecedented. They had thousands of ships and employed over 1 million people, including soldiers, sailors, administrators, and enslaved laborers.
Yeah.
That's also handy when you've got slave labor. It keeps costs down.
Yes.
In the future, we'll have bots for that. We don't need to use people for that
That's
anymore.
right. That's right.
Right. So um, now it's not a good ending for this company, although they did dominate for a couple hundred years. So actually, they had a good run.
Mhm.
Right. But as you can imagine, there was corruption problems.
Sure.
Employees often engaged in illegal private trade for their own enrichment, undermining the company's profits. The joke at the time was that VOC stood for, again, I won't say it in Dutch, but perished under corruption
Hmm.
is the translation. They did have competition then from the British East India Company.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the cost of maintaining a private army, navy, administrative bureaucracy was expensive. And then, of course, the market shifted. The demand for spices eventually leveled off, and the company was slow to adapt.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so it was dissolved in 1799. So they had a good run.
Yep.
And that brings us to the end of the slides. But